And we are keeping our eye on the markets at this hour as investors react to a weaker than expected jobs report showing a sharp slowdown in hiring. You look at the Dow right now, it is down more than 400 points. But at the same time, President Donald Trump put a steep tariff on global trading partners if they could not agree to trade deals with the United States. Now, back in April, the president declared Liberation Day. He promised higher tariffs would boost the U.S. economy. Trump imposed on-again, off-again deadlines for those deals, finally settling on today, August 1st. The president came out swinging overnight, hitting more than 60 countries with rates as high as 41% for their imports. Trump announced those tariffs will take effect in 7 days. And CBS News has learned that's to give customs officials enough time to implement the new rates. But higher tariffs for our neighbors to the north take effect immediately. Trump raised Canada's tariffs from 25% to 35%. It's important to note goods covered by a previous trade agreement are exempt, but the increased rates will have an impact on lumber, steel, aluminum, and auto imports. The president accused Canada of not addressing the flow of the drug fentanyl into the U.S. Trump also had this to say about what's behind the boost for Canada.
They have been charging very, very high tariffs to our farmers, some over 200%. And they've been treating our farmers very badly. They've been treating our country very badly for years. And look, we like Canada. I love Canada. I have so many friends in Canada. But they've been very poorly led. They've been very, very poorly led. And all we want is fairness for our country.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said his country is prepared for the higher tariffs. He said, in part, Canada will be our own best customer, creating more well-paying careers at home as we strengthen and diversify our trading partnerships throughout the world. So let's get to Washington and CBS News political reporter Zach Hudak. Zach, thank you for your time today. Has the White House reacted to these weaker jobs numbers?
Mugo, we just got a statement from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt in which she downplays these numbers. She says inflation is cold, wages are increasing, unemployment is stable, and she continued to pressure Fed Chair Jerome Powell to lower the interest rates. That's not something he can do alone. That is a vote. But that's something we've heard Donald Trump do repeatedly. I would also like to point out Steve Mirren, the chair of the White House Council on Economic Advisors, did an interview recently on this in which he acknowledged these numbers were decent, but not exactly what they wanted to see. But he did say, in terms of the uncertainty that has been fueled by the tariffs, that uncertainty was crucial for getting the leverage we needed to make deals. So there's an interesting type of spin going on from the White House where they're actually saying somewhat that we intentionally wanted to make ourselves a little bit uncomfortable as a negotiating tactic with these other countries.
That's interesting. The president announced a long list of countries he's putting new tariffs on starting next week. Can you take us through that?
Yeah, I think the ones that stand out most are the 39% to Switzerland, the 25% on India. Those are countries that we have a lot of trade with. The highest ones of all were 40% plus on Syria, Laos, and Myanmar. But those are not countries that we do a lot of trade with. I think that the Canada one is the one that jumped off the page, that 25 raising now to 35% this past midnight, and the one that jarred our ally Canada the most. I would also point out that there was an extension of 90 days for the increase in tariffs on Mexico, which was a bit of a surprise to a lot of folks. Our two allies to the north and to the south, it seems that as these tariff negotiations have gone on, President Trump has been a bit softer on Mexico than on Canada. The White House would argue that that has been a result of Mexico's willingness to negotiate, but Canada continues to say they are trying to negotiate.
Yeah, and you're talking about Canada, so let's stick with that because, as you said, the president hit the nation with a 35% tariff, and that's effective immediately. And that clearly puts us at odds with a key ally and our third largest trading partner. So where do things go from here?
It's a good question, Mugo. Canada's prime minister has said repeatedly that what they would like to return to is the agreement that President Trump signed during his first term, essentially a free trade agreement for the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. it does not look like we're headed in that direction. Canada continues to say they're negotiating. Now, as for what President Trump wants, we've heard a lot of Canadians argue that he's actually trying to make them so economically uncomfortable that the proposition he's raised in the past, that Canada become the 31st state, becomes more attractive to them. That's not something the president has been bringing up in recent days, but that is a fear of Canadians and something he's brought up in the past. So I think the next step forward is going to be continued negotiations. And I would point out that even though President Trump sort of caught Canada off guard with these tariffs and set them in effect at midnight, did not give them much notice on it, even though he did that, throughout his tariff negotiations over the past few months, he has gone back and forth. It would not be out of the realm of possibility that by the end of the day or early next week, he has relowered that tariff rate for Canada if he feels that Canada is coming to the table and making concessions. So I think that's probably the most likely outcome, but there are a lot of things that could play out here in this heated negotiation with our close ally of Canada.
Yeah, and we shall wait and see. CBS News political reporter Zach Hudak in Washington. Great name, by the way. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us on 24/7. All right, let's get to Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady in New York. Kelly, let's go back to that jobs report. Can you walk us through the main takeaways here?
Yeah, so this was a weaker than expected jobs report. We added 73,000 jobs in the month of July, but I think the bigger story was that we got some revisions to the previous two jobs reports. So that would be May and June. And we got revisions to the tune of over 250,000 less jobs were created in those 2 months if you put them together. Now, remember, last jobs report, it was a good headline number, but there was some weakness in the private sector. And that became even more apparent when you looked at these revisions. In the month of June, we only added 3,000 jobs in the private sector. And so you sort of take all of this together. I know I'm saying a lot of economic terms, revisions this, revisions that. What that tells you is in May, June, and July, each month, we added less than 100,000 jobs to the economy. So this report today is not just a right now thing that we're seeing weakening. We have seen weakening over the past few months. And a lot of the reasons why have to do with tariffs. It has to do with the new immigration policy, that there aren't as many workers out there. And what this tells you is a lot of the anecdotes that we have heard from businesses, that they are pausing, they're waiting and seeing. They're not doing mass layoffs, which is good, but they're not creating more jobs because there's been so much uncertainty. And when you look at what the Federal Reserve just did this week, where they chose to leave interest rates the same because they've been looking at inflation that's ticking up a little bit and a healthy labor market, this is the beginning of a trend where that labor market is starting to show cracks and not be as healthy as it has been over the last year.
Okay, Kelly, well then let's talk about the Federal Reserve, because we know President Trump continues to pressure Fed Chair Jerome Powell to lower interest rates. So could this jobs report make that happen?
It's a possibility. Now, we know also that the Federal Reserve is going to get another inflation report and another jobs report before they meet to make that decision. Yesterday, we got an inflation report where we saw prices rise, that inflation was higher than expected. This jobs report comes out today and it shows that hiring is lower than expected for July and the past couple of months. So we're going to get more data points, and that will give the Federal Reserve a lot more information to work with. We also know, of course, as you were just talking about in the last segment, we're going to have higher tariffs take effect. And so that is going to be something that the Federal Reserve is looking at and thinking about how that's going to impact prices in the next few months. But I love to look at what has happened historically. And you go back to when the Federal Reserve started cutting interest rates the last time around. So they made the first cut in September 2024. That came off of 3 months of weak jobs data. Very similar to the trend that we're seeing now. So I think a lot of people are wondering, okay, is this going to push them to cut? Because the data of a weakening jobs market, we are starting to see that. And that's sort of the thing that Powell kept saying during the press conference. Hey, we have a good labor market. It's healthy, it's healthy, it's healthy. So again, we'll get more data. But right now, the people that I'm talking to are saying that this makes a case for a potential rate cut in the next meeting or two at least.
And Kelly, I'm curious here. Hiring is lower, and is that because you have business owners, companies who are, like the word we always use all the time, uncertain about what's going to come next because of the tariffs?
The tariffs are part of it. They are not hiring as much because they don't know what the trade policy is going to be. They don't know if they're importing goods and how much they're going to have to pay. Essentially, what they don't know is how their costs are going to develop over the next few months. And so they don't want to commit to higher labor costs when maybe costs are going to go up in another area. Right. The other thing that we are hearing is that we have a more cautious consumer, especially on the lower income side. And so when you're a business, you don't want to get ahead and hire too many people if you're not going to have people coming in the door as much, right? So you're sort of making all of these predictions, and that's why you have seen businesses sort of just wait and see. I also mentioned the immigration policy changes. When you don't have as many workers out there in certain sectors, you're not going to create roles. But altogether, you just have businesses sort of going, okay, I don't want to make any moves right now. Where it's going to be really concerning, and I want to underscore this because I don't want anyone to be panicking over their lunch or their coffee right now. We haven't seen this yet, but if businesses decide to cut costs by cutting labor and cutting jobs, that's when you really have to worry. But we have not seen that yet.
Okay, CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady, always making things make sense for us. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Kakak nggak diajak.